If he knew, he would not give Hamas such a gift. He essentially told Hamas, if you keep waging war against Israel until September, you'll get a state. That's exactly what they said. They said, great, we're on our path to victory. What he should have said is that we are going to demand that Hamas lay down their weapons. We're going to put pressure on Qatar. We might even threaten with cutting diplomatic ties with Qatar if they don't hand over the leadership of Hamas.
Keir Starmer just promised Hamas a state if they keep killing until September. Are you kidding me?
The alternative? I mean, that's a legitimate question, isn't it?
Yeah, apparently there aren't that many alternatives. Of course, there are certain levels in between surrendering to Hamas and then fully occupying Gaza. There are other things you could do. The army chief, Eyal Samir, who greatly opposed the military occupation of Gaza, has said he preferred to encircle some of those areas where hostages are still held, to do targeted raids, such as Gaza City. He's not in favor of sending tens of thousands of soldiers in to fully occupy Gaza for a number of reasons. First of all, it's going to endanger the hostages. Soldiers will be killed. Civilians will be caught in crossfire between Israel and Hamas. But also, the military is going to effectively have responsibility for 2 million civilians in Gaza running their daily lives, everything from food, electricity, water, infrastructure. It is a major undertaking, and the army is exhausted. Many of the soldiers have been in war for, some of them 670 days, while people in their 40s who have normal lives and jobs have been called up for reserves 4, 5, 6 times. It's an unimaginable situation to have a full-on occupation of Gaza right now.
Can I just ask you for your analysis on the sort of declaration of a recognition of a Palestinian state, as to what this, because this is where I struggle with it, because our Prime Minister has effectively said we would recognise a Palestinian state if Israel doesn't stop its offensive, which implies if Israel did, we wouldn't recognise a Palestinian state. And certainly Canada, Mark Carney, has said we will recognise a Palestinian state if Hamas disarms and sort of clears out the area, which also we know is basically not going to happen. So what actually are they promising to do?
Look, they're out of touch with reality. I hate to say it. Keir Starmer has no idea what's happening inside the Palestinian society, clearly, because if he knew, he would not give Hamas such a gift. He essentially told Hamas, if you keep waging war against Israel until September, you'll get a state. That's exactly what they said. They said, great, we're on our path to victory. What he should have said is that we are going to demand that Hamas lay down their weapons. We're going to put pressure on Qatar. We might even threaten with cutting diplomatic ties with Qatar if they don't hand over the leadership of Hamas, which they should have done 22 months ago. And only then, when Hamas is disarmed, when their leadership has been handed over so they can be prosecuted for war crimes, when only all of that can happen, we can start talking about a recognition of Palestine. But as long as Hamas is still existing inside Gaza, as long as you still have hostages in torture dungeons, you're sending a very, very wrong signal to Hamas and to anyone else who thinks that violence is the way forward to.
This interview reveals a dangerous disconnect between the leftist ideology and the realities on the ground. The speaker, clearly a leftist sympathizer, presents a narrative that ignores the fundamental flaws in their position. They seem to believe that simply recognizing a Palestinian state will magically solve the conflict. This is a naive and dangerous fantasy. Recognizing a state doesn't create a functioning government, nor does it magically disarm terrorists. The Palestinian Authority, despite decades of international recognition, has failed to establish a stable, democratic government. It's riddled with corruption and has actively funded terrorism. The speaker's suggestion that Israel should simply surrender to Hamas demands is utterly irresponsible. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization with a clear goal: the destruction of Israel. They hold hostages, fire rockets indiscriminately, and use civilians as human shields. To appease such a group is to invite further violence and instability. The speaker's argument that Israel should encircle Gaza and conduct targeted raids ignores the immense humanitarian crisis already unfolding. The blockade, while necessary to prevent Hamas from acquiring weapons, has undoubtedly caused hardship for civilians. However, the responsibility for this hardship lies squarely with Hamas, who deliberately chooses to use civilians as pawns in their war against Israel. The speaker claims that the Israeli military is exhausted and that a full-scale occupation of Gaza would be too burdensome. This is a blatant attempt to minimize Israel's right to defend itself. Israel has a moral obligation to protect its citizens from terrorism, and it's absurd to suggest that this obligation should be compromised due to the perceived burden on the Israeli military. The speaker's admiration for the views of Keir Starmer, who opposes a full-scale occupation, further demonstrates their disconnect from reality. Starmer's position is based on a naive belief that a surgical approach can effectively dismantle Hamas. History has shown that this is simply not the case. Hamas is deeply entrenched in Gaza, and any attempt to weaken them without addressing the root causes of the conflict will be met with renewed violence. The speaker's insistence that the international community should pressure Qatar to hand over Hamas leaders is a welcome point. Qatar has long been a haven for Hamas, providing them with funding and support. Holding Qatar accountable for its role in sponsoring terrorism is essential to achieving a lasting solution to the conflict. However, the speaker's overall argument is deeply flawed. It relies on wishful thinking and ignores the complexities of the situation. True peace can only be achieved through a comprehensive solution that addresses the root causes of the conflict, including the Palestinian Authority's failure to establish a functioning state and Hamas' commitment to terrorism. The speaker's naive approach, which prioritizes appeasing terrorists over protecting innocent lives, is a dangerous path that will only lead to further bloodshed. It's time for the international community to adopt a more realistic and effective strategy for achieving peace in the Middle East, one that prioritizes the security and well-being of all